Good afternoon and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first CCL hosted episode of the Ask Sean Show. Our guest, Sean Armstrong, is here from the Humboldt Bay area in California. And today is August 26th, 2024. So we've invited not just CCL members, but our friends and partners from multiple other climate groups around the country. And we're excited that well over half are from our partner groups. I'm going to go ahead and share a couple of slides, and then we'll hand it over to Sean. I'll give a quick overview of today's presentation. So we should have a slide that says intro. Can someone confirm?
Yes. Yep.
All right, fantastic. And so again, I've already mentioned the topic of the show, but for those who have not yet had the pleasure of hearing one of Sean's webinars, the Ask Sean Show is hosted by Sean Armstrong. He's the founder and managing principal of Redwood Energy up in Arcata, California.
Oh,
and
good.
one of the leading designers of net zero carbon and zero carbon housing around the United States, especially multifamily. And this show is well over 20 episodes now, and I love it because we have actual people who are working engaged on the journey of electrifying their own homes, and somewhere along the way they may have stubbed their toe, and Sean listens to the conundrum that they've found themselves in right now and helps them unstub their toe. And he's got just mountains and mountains of experience and data helping back up the recommendations he gives. And it's a super fun and interacting opportunity. This was started probably 2 years ago, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong there, but Climate Reality Project, the Orange County chapter, and then Los Angeles and San Fernando chapters got it started, I think, and then a few other climate groups have hosted some episodes along the way. So it's a great venue for those of us who are trying to electrify our houses and help other people electrify theirs. We're going to do a 90-minute webinar today, and we have 4 case studies. Sean is going to spend maybe about 20 minutes giving us a little overview of why electrify and some of the history of electrification. And then we're going to go into our case studies. Our case studies are from around the country, and this is one of the exciting things to me. We've got cold and wet up in Vermont, cold and humid. We've got hot and humid in the southeast in Georgia. We've got hot and dry in the desert southwest in Arizona, and we have cold and dry in Colorado. And so I love the juxtaposition of all those different challenges for our space heating, especially, and some dehumidification challenges, especially. We'll talk about some of those. And let's see. With that, I think, Sean, I can go ahead and pass the baton to you.
Thank you very much, Pete, for having me. Thanks all of y'all for being here. I want to strongly encourage you to ask questions as we go along in the chat. And I'm looking at the chat right now. So it's got, hi, everyone. Hello, Robert. Hello, Kathy. It was nice to see you last week. Hello, Mark. Hello, Lawrence. Hello, Ed. Okay, so first thing you're seeing here is, I know this is going to go fast. There's a whole book, though, that is very clear. Take your time with that. It's on our website, redwoodenergy.net, and it's a pocket guide to all electric retrofits of single-family homes. It's a free download. You can see that it's got all the details. People use it. It's, even though it's like 3 years old now, it's still current. There's nothing significant that's changed. It's still current. The explanations are still accurate, etc. The products are the products. There's everything you need there. Now, just hello again. I started studying this in 1995. I think that some of you are dating in your efforts from the 1980s. Well, you might recognize this kind of house. This is a demonstration house. It still exists. It was 1978 is when they started the organization, and they retrofitted this house under Jimmy Carter's monies. But it was a campus version of something that was all over the nation in cities. But because it was funded by campus students, it didn't disappear when Ronald Reagan came into power in 1981, right? He canceled the funding for all these demonstration houses nationally. So I got taught there. I arrived in 1995, pedal power, off grid, 12-volt batteries downstairs, a wind turbine. Then 2005, translated all that experience and became a project manager for a large general contractor and an affordable housing division, which you here see as Pacific West Communities. But it meant I ran bids, I worked with all the field staff, I got construction costs for big projects, and innovated there zero net energy apartment complexes and single family homes. And that company, which is now called Danco Communities, we had the first successful zero net energy apartment complex and the first successful zero net energy subdivision. So 26 houses and 29 apartments. Quite a success. I've gotten lots of awards, United Nations. I feel so very awarded these days. So from 2011 till now, because lost my job in the Great Recession, so did my partner, Michael Winkler. We started this 2-person consultancy. Now we've got about 19 staff, and we worked on even cool big projects like this affordable housing that's in Washington, D.C. on the Beltway with a 9-story tall PV wall. Thanks, Pete, for putting the links into the chat. And Tom Cabot, just so you know, he's here on his phone, and he can answer questions as I speak. He is the original author of our Watt diet approach, and just as technical expert as anybody. So now we're off. First, where are we today? We are in if you're in California, one of the least electrified states in the United States. Find your own state. Now, what you'll see is that the trend generally is that southern states are all electric more than northern states, primarily because of the climate. And I'll get into that detail in just a moment. But now you can see that just because I'm here in California doesn't mean that I'm surrounded by all electric construction. Quite the contrary, it's been a very hard push against the petrostate interests of California, as well as just intellectual resilience to new information. But look, things are changing. This is electric vehicle adoption. Here on the right-hand side, you can see this is the Bay Area. This is just from this spring, March 12th, 2014. And you can see in some zip codes, more than 50% of the new cars being registered are electric. And this is what it looks like in China a few years ago. This is what it looks like in Norway in 2019. Right now, Norway sales are about 96% all electric vehicles. And so you can see how where it starts, we're going to be all electric in the 90% within the next 2 years in the Bay Area. And our country, of course, will be following right behind. This is exponential growth. This is right now for sale. This is an all-electric, hold on for just a second here. Sorry, I have kids that come. So anyway, so this lovely yacht, it's 120 feet long, and it comes on, as you can see on the right-hand side of the little drone airplane. That's just a computer-generated image. I don't know if it's actually for sale or not. They say it is. But in the middle, this electric submarine, and down below, the electric jet skis, those are totally real. Those pop off the side. And this is an all-electric solar-powered yacht that can go about 100 miles a day without any gasoline, just solar and batteries. Oh, by the way, if you can, Pete, could you mute people if they're not muted already, just so people can do their own life in case?
Yep, I've been doing that, and I'll ask our attendees to please be polite and mute yourselves when you're not speaking. Thanks.
There you go. But you're of course welcome to ask questions. This is about this company, the Silent Company. So they sell silent 60s, silent 80s, and silent 120s. It's about $1 million. No, is it? It's $12 million to the 120 square foot. So you do the math, about $100,000 a linear foot. Got six places to sleep in at this one. It's got a whole floor that's dedicated to all induction restaurant, so to speak, for the people who are cooking there. I think there's chefs. You know, it's one of those places where you could be on one of those like down below chef shows. Now, I've given you like this is how awesome it could be. We could be like Hawaii, 72% to all electric, or Florida, 77% to all electric. We can get way up there with our electric vehicle adoption. Even the richest people have transitioned over to all electric solar powered stuff. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a basic technology that underlies all of this called the heat pump. This is a cutaway. And what is a heat pump? It's a fan. That's mostly what's inside of it is a fan. The fan of an air source heat pump is what is moving the air, which is the source of the heating in the wintertime, or it's a place that you get rid of the heat in the summertime. That fan blows the air. Then on the right-hand side, you can see a compressor, which is essentially a kind of pump with a weird elliptical little element inside that squishes the liquid and can turn it into, from a gas into a liquid, squish it into its liquid form. And it goes from gas to liquid, liquid to gas, back and forth, transferring heat. And that's the basics. It's a fan and then a compressor that is compressing a gas into a liquid. Now, this is a still from an animation to help you capture this idea. When this is in air conditioning mode, on the left-hand side, there's heat in your room. You're gathering the heat. And then you're taking it outside and blowing it. That's air conditioner mode, as you go from left to right, blowing away the heat. You ever stood in front of an air conditioner outside? In the wintertime, it is exactly reversed. You start collecting the heat from the outside and you blow it inside. It's a basic technology that was developed a long time ago by a guy in like the 1850s. There's really a few different people, to be honest. But one fellow in particular, he gets credit. He got some ether. He was doing typesetting and got the ether on his hands. He's like, "Ooh, it's so cold. It's so interesting how this fossil fuel basically boils on my hand and makes my hand really cold." Capturing that experience and saying, if I boil something, it sucks heat into this liquid that boils at very low temperatures. You can boil modern refrigerants at -40 to -110 Fahrenheit is when they boil, going from liquid into gas, unless they're under pressure, which is what that compressor is for. So here on the left-hand side, this is a big, old-fashioned heat pump that is being used to make ice. And the ice, this is Anheuser-Busch. These are the people who funded the development of heat pumps to make ice, and then it got funded by like print plants that were trying to dehumidify using the same process that you're using to make ice. And see on the right-hand side, ice being delivered. This is during World War I. It was a major technology all the way up until almost the 1930s when people got home refrigerators. Because you got ice made in one place and it got delivered to you. But 1930s, here's Carrier, a modern American brand, is the first room air conditioner, which is a heat pump that works in one direction, collecting the heat from inside and blowing it outside. The reversible types they figured out in the 1940s. And you can see here a 1950s heat pump right there, how pleasant it is to stand right in front of it, get blasted with cold air. And it can also work in the wintertime. But these ones, lacking a computer, lacking electric strategies for de-icing it, they didn't go below about 35 degrees Fahrenheit without turning into electric resistance heaters, which is why you saw heat pump adoption, the green colors in the southern states was where it didn't really matter that it went into electric resistance because it didn't get that cold there in the first place. Not often. So next little part of the story, you just saw the invention of heat pumps for space heating and cooling, right? From there, it's just been elaboration and sophistication. Here, this is the advent of heat pump water heaters. So this was a company called the Dairy Equipment, Wisconsin Dairy Equipment Corporation. They would chill the milk, comes out of the cow hot, has to be made cold so it doesn't spoil. And then they started storing the heat in tanks so you could use it for wash down of the dairy. There's moving heat from the tank and into a smaller tank, so chilling the milk. And then they said in 1978, the same year that CCAT, that demonstration house, was founded, like, let's do that small style. We'll stick one of these little tiny heat pumps on top of a water tank, the thermistor. Pardon me, getting over either COVID or a cold. We'll never know now. But so we had heat pump water heaters and heat pump space heating systems that worked by the time that Reagan came into governance. This is the modern stuff. It comes with a computer inside of it, has ever since 2009. It has the ability to de-ice itself in the wintertime, so it can work down to -30 Fahrenheit. Pardon me. And it comes with wall-mounted fan coils, like on the right-hand side. But if you go down, you can see it can also come in with a multi-position air handler of different efficiencies and configurations of blowing strongly, or they're basically different fan energy strengths. You can go from, say, left-hand side, the multi-position air handler SVZ, the low static, which just means it doesn't have a very strong fan, and you might serve ducts that are only 8 feet long. And this is a mid-static, so maybe 16 feet long. And then the multi, which is, you can blast it all the way through the attic for bigger buildings. All of those can be attached to this one box here in the middle, which has the fan inside of it. And remember, the little compressor there off on the right-hand side from the cutaway I showed you, which, just to remind you, this is this black thing right here, that's the compressor that does the job of making a gas go into a liquid, controls that process. That's how you get the heat out. Okay, you've probably seen these versions of the heat pumps. This is kind of American style, and that's fine. American style means the fan is going up and down, and Eurasian style means the fan is oriented this way, left to right. The air goes from the back of it to the front of it, as opposed to this, for no good reason that I can tell. They just have the fan oriented the other way. Whatever. These are all like Goodman, Daikin, Carrier, although Daikin actually owns Goodman, little trick there. But these all have very cold climate performance. So -5, -10, -4, and they go colder than that. And these aren't even the coldest possible models, but this is an illustration that no matter where you're living in the continental United States, until you get up into like central Alaska, you're solid. Central Alaska can get to -45 Fahrenheit. And in that case, you need electric resistance backup. But in the continental United States, you don't. You can just use a fan, use the heat pump. If you are in the muggier part of the United States, the eastern part of the United States, southeastern, etc., a dehumidifier can be really nice. This is one being installed in line with the heating and the cooling, so you can sort of independently control the humidity of the air that's coming out of your ductwork. Of course, you can just buy one at the hardware store and stick it in your bathroom if that's the moist spot. But you can discover that dehumidifying the air can make it feel colder or feel more comfortable, so to speak, than just chilling the air. It is your ability to evaporate your own moisture on your skin. Your ability, that is the sense of coolness. And if you have very high humidity air, even if it's on the cool side, it is not easy to feel cooled off. So dehumidification can be a really strong idea. Stick it in your ductwork. Oh, Sean Scalling, you say, thanks for including Alaska in the discussion. You're absolutely welcome. If I'm going to show you this one right here. This is the Infinity heat pump with a base pan heater. This is an example of one that can go to -30 Fahrenheit. And look at its efficiency. SEER 42. This is also the most efficient heat pump that is for sale in the United States right now. HSPF 15, it's also the most efficient heater. Note though, that this is sized for, say, 7,000 BTUs. It's really sized for a room or two. That the whole thing is that it has an oversized fan. It has a very undersized production of heat, but that's how you do it. Is you have a big fan moving lots of air, so that even when it's crazy cold outside, you're still collecting a fair amount of heat. And so this is, you might put one in a bedroom and another one in a living room. You might like put 3 or 4 in your house. But this is a dependable, super duper efficient system. A lot of people worry, by the way, that we're going to have an electrical peak as a result of electrification that is bigger than now. It's just the opposite. Field data has shown us that because peaks are driven by air conditioning, in the northern climates and in Florida, the biggest peak is the wintertime electric resistance heating during cold snaps. That if we move to heat pumps, we get way more efficient air conditioning using just automatically about half as much air conditioning energy during the summer. And the heat pumps, if they're like this, like an efficient heat pump, not even like this, an HSPF, say 10, as opposed to 15 here. That HSPF 10 heat pump has a SEER 19, and it makes less of a peak in the wintertime and reduces the peak in the summer. So it's actually our solution is to electrify. And when we use these efficient heat pumps, we get a better grid than we have today. Not worse, but better. This is a ground source heat pump and an air source heat pump. Either way, you can do what's radiant floors. Some folks have radiant floors. Some people want radiant floors. I don't personally recommend them because they're the most expensive way to deliver heating and cooling. And if you have a leak, you have a problem. But I'm going to show you in a second, there's also radiators you can pair with this. But on the top, these are ground source heat pumps, which means you put pipes into the ground and you circulate either water or propylene glycol, and you collect heat in the wintertime and you discharge heat in the summer. You're getting rid of air conditioning heat. On the bottom, these are would meet the same needs of a radiant floor, etc., but it's an air source heat pump, which is less expensive to install because you don't have to dig into the ground. Now here are radiators. These are very efficient radiators at distributing heat, and these can operate down to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, so you can have a very efficient heat pump in the wintertime while keeping your house at 80 degrees, as opposed to burning gas and then making the water 160 degrees Fahrenheit and running them through big old chunks of metal that don't have much surface area that are wicked hot and dangerous. It's like that's the old school radiators. I would encourage people to get rid of those radiators so that you can get an air source heat pump and run it at the very efficient temperatures of like 120 down to 80 Fahrenheit. So Yaga, that's what you're looking at, the Yaga climate. These are examples of heat pump or radiators designed for air source and ground source heat pumps. Get rid of your gas stove. So if you have a gas stove, the person who's cooking on the gas stove, that's the equivalent of someone who's smoking secondhand cigarettes in the house. Back when people did have secondhand cigarette smoke in the house, like 1994, they did a big study, hundreds of people, and they found that an electric stove with a cigarette smoker in the house was equivalent to a gas stove without a cigarette smoker in the house. Gas stoves are like cigarette smokers. That's the answer. And they smoke in your house. They harm the cook the most. They harm babies because formaldehyde that's the #1 source of formaldehyde. It comes rolling heavier than air off the stove, poisons the children, poisons the pets around your feet. Bad for everybody. It's secondhand cigarette smoke. No one these days invites over someone to smoke in your house all day, every day, especially if you have your grandkids visiting. So LG makes an excellent stove, but you see it's about $2,600, $2,500. Frigidaire is about as low cost of an induction stove, and you can find them even for $1,000 sometimes on sale, but $1,400, $1,500. I personally recommend LG and Samsung. One thing is that my grandma just died last week at 103 years old. And so as her Alzheimer's is taking her, the last couple of years, we discovered that it was dangerous for her to have access to an electric resistant stove because she would accidentally leave it on, which can start a fire and can burn somebody. So we went out and got an induction stove to keep her so she could live at home until she just died last week and safely. And so it's one of the things to think about is aging in place is get a stove that can't start a fire. Induction doesn't interact with paper. It doesn't interact with anything other than metals like cast iron, anything that can take a magnet like nickel, stainless steel, etc. It's safe. Safe and faster and better. You know, faster and better is the easiest ones, but safe. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit more of the technical stuff of how to electrify your house quickly. So, if you wanted to just get it done, and in 2017, my mother-in-law died in the Tubbs fire. It was the Santa Rosa fire. You recall there was huge branches being thrown by the winds or almost 100 miles an hour, firing branches across highways, lit so many houses on fire. And my mother-in-law, who had weak lungs, she was 6 years old and she'd had thyroid cancer at 16, got radiation therapy. She died of smoke inhalation, and it was absolutely horrible. So we pulled our gas stove out of our house, which she had helped us install, this antique, cool, old stove that I had desired because it had insulation in it. It was old and neat. And we threw it out and said, okay, we're getting our house electrified now. And that's the last thing. And so if you're in that spirit of like, you've had enough, you've just absolutely had enough, this is how you get it done. And it's pretty affordable. So on the left hand side, this is a condensing washer dryer. You can also get a heat pump washer dryer. The reason why you want to get a combination product is because it's the easiest one to just plug into the wall with the existing normal outlet that's right there. So that it's you can plug it in, just any old outlet nearby. You can get the washer dryer models. They're very power efficient. They don't take more power than is in the 120-volt outlet there. Then you can see this 500-watt 120-volt, plug it in anywhere. Ream tank, A.O. Smith makes one. Bradford White makes one. There's a couple of manufacturers I'm forgetting, but those are the big three. The 120-volt, they're designed to plug into any outlet in your house. So you can just, like a washing machine, these things, they have cold water in, hot water out, plug it into the wall. So yes, you can get a building permit. Yes, you can hire a plumber, but it is also no more difficult than installing a washing machine, which you just has cold water in, hot water out, and you plug it into the wall. So then next over here, this is an air source heat pump that clips onto the wall. You cut 2 holes into the wall, a duct goes in, a duct goes out. So air is delivered into this box and then out of the box. But it's 120 volts and it is a cold climate, produces plenty of baking heat down to -15 Fahrenheit. Very popular in our apartment complexes because it's pretty much the least cost way to do it. One in each bedroom. They can make up to 15,000 BTUs, but get derated down to about 7,000 when it gets really cold out. And then on the right-hand side, this is what my family's been cooking on since 2017 when Nan died, which is we put in some metal shelving where that stove used to be. We have an Oster extra large plug-in 120-volt oven. And we have 2 of these 2-burner induction ranges, one in the same circuit as the oven, and then the second kitchen circuit. Each kitchen is supposed to, by code, have 2 appliance circuits, so you can plug in blenders and toasters at the same time. So we went to the other outlet and plugged this one in as well. And we have all normal appliances, blenders and toasters and things, and microwaves. It all works out just fine. We never ever have a circuit blast, and we've got 3 kids, and I cook for a total of 5 to 6 people sometimes. So works great. If you would like to barbecue, when I see the chat, let me check in any questions here. Okay, Mark. Well, Lawrence, you asked, can one heat pump domestic water heater can one heat pump heat domestic water and hydronic floor heating water? Yes. It would be a bigger one, not like a little tank type, but one of those boxes that looks just like what I was showing you here, right? These are air source heat pumps for heating hydronic floors, etc. Go back to where I was. So you just put an extra tank next, like you have that fan coil box thing outside, and then there's a storage tank for your domestic hot water, and that's how you do it. It's not cheaper usually. Usually having the box outside and an extra tank inside for your water heating is a more expensive way to go about it. Combining systems requires you to have a much bigger heat pump outside because you're heating water for your domestic hot water and for your space heating in the wintertime. That bigger box outside is disproportionately more expensive to do that. And then you bring hot water in or cold water in. You have to have a box that coordinates in between your storage tank, your own hot water, and the rest of the house. And that valves box with all its controls is expensive. How expensive? Like $3,000 to $10,000 expensive, more than the cost of just buying a heat pump water heater that was integrated, like the tank type I'm showing you. So just want to emphasize that it is usually not more efficient, and it is definitely not less expensive to combine hydronic space heating with domestic hot water. Go ahead and do it. Just don't think that you're saving money or energy. Okay. Let's see here. Next question was Bruce Plank. You asked, does the 120-volt heat pump water heater provide enough hot water for a two-person family? I love this question. Let me talk about that for a second. So this is the best way to provide hot water for a family. We field tested electric resistance standard backup heat pump water heater tanks called hybrids, right? 30 amps of backup on it. That is a worse way to try to meet the needs of a large family. And we studied up to 7-person households in an entire apartment complex of low-income families. So one person is 7-person households. And what we found is that if we stored the water at 140 Fahrenheit, the same volume, and this black thing that you're looking at here, these are mixing valves so that you always deliver it at a safe 125 or 120, depending upon what you choose. Different codes, some say 120, some say 125. But you store it at 140. That is a better strategy for meeting the Saturday everyone's taking a shower in a row demands. It is a better way of meeting, I would like to have a really big bathtub tonight, is having more hot water, more heat in storage. That we demonstrated as a fact. This is a superior water heater. That's fact. And anyone who's saying, oh, you need electric resistance is trying to sell you a worse product. You will not get as much hot water delivered out of it. It's a falsehood, and it just ends up wasting a bunch of this and that. So if you want to have your best experience, 2 people is a 40-gallon tank to, well, 2 to 3 people is a 40-gallon tank. The 50-gallon tank usually works great for up to 5 people in a household. And if you have more than 5 people, then you can get a 65-gallon or an 80-gallon tank. And but in our apartment complexes, we usually only put in 50-gallon tanks because it is rare for us to have a 6 or 7-person household. And when households get that big, it's not a surprise that you run out of hot water after the 4th or 8th shower or whatever. I grew up in a household with 6 people, and we ran out of hot water all the time with our 40-gallon tank of gas hot water. So this is the best way to get a heat pump water heater serving your families. Stuart, you helped out answering with the the monoblock fan coil systems like Chiltrex, Enertech. Bruce, you said, are the Innova heat pumps generally available? Yes, they are. You get them not retail like big box style. Instead, you have to get them through distributors. So Norman S. Wright is the distributor that I know of in California. But you can certainly contact them through the website if you need a local distributor of them. Now you, Mark Friedman, you installed a 120-volt heat pump for 2 people. You wanted a dedicated circuit. You've had no issues with hot water shortages. Yep, and you've had 2 showers going without an issue. Yes. Bruce, you say, why is the recovery time faster on a dedicated circuit? And the shared circuit power one, 1500 watts. Yeah, I have a dedicated circuit one, which I regret getting, which is, I think they're the only one who's selling the dedicated circuit is Rheem. Um, and you can get electric resistance built into your tanks from A.O. Smith. They have a 900 watt, and 900 watts, and that means you can do it on a shared circuit. Um, yeah, I think the dedicated circuit is unnecessary. That's just what it comes down to. It means you can have access to more power, but that's not the best solution. The best solution is having the water stored at a hotter temperature. It's there for you. You're not trying to make it up in the moment. Um, let's see. Larry Kramer, I have a comfort system so that I always have hot water remotely in the house. And I still use that system with the heat pump water heater. And I think you mean you have a recirculating pump, so it's always there. And a push button recirculating pump is a great idea. And an always recirculating is a terrible idea. It will destroy the efficiency of a heat pump water heater. You might as well use an electric resistance tank because it'll be that efficient or worse to try to run a heat pump water heater if you have a constant recirculation of hot water running through it. They're not designed for that. But you solve it by just doing a push button, which also saves a ton of energy. Now, Mark Fosnage, you said, or your question was, ground source you said is more expensive. Yes, because of the drilling. That's what makes them expensive, is drilling into the ground. But is there a payback versus air source? No, there is not. Or is the air source the best answer for today and in the next 10 to 20 years? Yes, that's the truth, unless you're in central Alaska. And once you start having real weather below -30, then you absolutely should be using a ground source heat pump or have electric resistance backup, or both, or have wood, like a wood pellet stove backup. I work with a housing authority in Alaska. I love, I'm big fans of them. They're in the North Slope, the northernmost city of all, and they're putting induction stoves because they don't want to poison people with gas fumes in the winter time. It's very difficult to do air exchanges when it's so cold outside. And they're putting in super duper cold climate heat pump space heating systems, but also with pellet stoves. Now, Julia, you read that a rule of thumb is that a 6,000 square foot or bigger house, a ground source might be more economical. No, that wouldn't be true. There's just nothing more economical about drilling holes in the ground than putting in air source heat pumps. You can also use one system for 2 or more houses. Yes, but you can do that with air source heat pumps also. You're just now using a commercial scale, like larger building heat pump that's an air source heat pump. There really is nothing cheaper about drilling, period. That's the answer. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the slide deck. Oh, there's one more person. Mark Friedman, who said, we were space limited to the 50 gallons for the heat pump water heater and happened to have a dedicated circuit on the wall behind it, so it's easy for us. Yeah, that's perfect. Sounds good. The dedicated circuit uses more fans. It's a larger heat pump, and that's why it's 1400 watts, not because it has electric resistance backup for the Rheem, specifically for the Rheem. So it makes it noisier, but it also makes it do a better job of dehumidification if it's down in the basement. That's the best thing about heat pump water heaters, is that they dehumidify the garage, they dehumidify the basement, they get rid of extra moisture. So on the left-hand side, barbecuing is delicious. Everyone loves it. This Weber plugs into the wall. It's a fantastic barbecue. You're loving it. If you want to get a 240 volt one like the one on the right, more power to you, literally. But you don't have to. The 120 volt on the left. I have a friend of mine who literally grills every day. He's on a very restricted diet, so he's always eating chicken, and he likes to grill it. And so I gave him that as a gift. Mark Peterson, you said, any experience with the 120 volt battery induction cooktop? Yes, my company is field testing the first 36 coming out of the factory. We're installing them tomorrow. They show up into a local tribal nation, Sherry Heights. And I had field tested it in my own house for 2 months before my ex fell and broke it with a big bowl. It's got a glass piece on the top. If you smash it really hard with a piece of metal, you can break it. So, but other than that, my kids cooked on it. It was perfectly safe. It was easy to use. It doesn't use more than 1,800 watts. It provides up to 9,000 watts of cooking, which is way excessive. We never, and this is with cooking like on 3 burners and using the oven. We couldn't use it more than about 2,400 watts. So it's a little overkill for anybody, really. Like cooking does not need to be done with 9,000 watts. It's a darn shame that they're built that way because it's impossible. We actually had NREL test turning on an induction stove on full blast and everything on. You can't even cook that way. That's a separate issue. I'm trying to invent an 1,800-watt stove that doesn't have a battery in it, but the battery is cool, because then it gives you power during an outage. Here is my child, Twilight, experimenting on the day that I plugged this in front of the little tiny house Christmas tree. And it's an ultrasound making mist lit with either LEDs or halogens, depending upon the product you're getting. And it can produce heat if you plug in the one that comes with it, like you buy an extra heater to incorporate in it, but it is magical and completely safe. But it looks just like fire. I swear to God, you think you're gonna light yourself on fire sticking your hand into it, and it's just like this cool little mist coming up. It uses 1 liter over the course of a couple of days. I mean, it really doesn't even add any humidity. It's an amazing product. So Dimplex makes them. Here you can see that they make cassettes that you can put into like brick fireplaces and stone fireplaces. Exactly, Meredith, like the Olympic torch. I love that Olympic torch that they're lighting a fire underneath that helium balloon that's floating, and people are like, we need to keep it next to the Eiffel Tower. It's so pretty. It's like, yeah, this is pretty fun to have the ability to light a gigantic fire in the sky. And it's wicked beautiful. Lawrence, you asked, does yours have an outlet for backup power during outage for the fridge? Yes. The Channing Street copper stoves, which I don't have an image of, they have a 15 amp, 120 volt outlet that is designed for your fridge or for cell phone charging kind of stuff. Lawrence, you say that the production one doesn't. I don't know that to be true. Maybe it is.
I talked with Cooper at a fair, and they said the early ones did, but even though the inverter was UL listed, it's not UL listed if it's inside another appliance. So they said they'll have to wait till they hammer out the certification. Until then, they'll be putting them out without backup power.
Oh, well, you know something I hadn't heard yet then. Thank you for telling me.
So is yours a pre-production model or early production?
I got the second one that ever they made, and that went into my house. And then the next 35 that are arriving are their first ones off the factory floor. So, like I said, they're arriving tomorrow, but half of us have COVID now because I hosted a super spreader event apparently last week at the Zero Carbon Retreat. I'm glad you came to last year's one, Pete, because this year's one might have got so yeah, they're coming tomorrow, and we just today I was emailing them like we need to do this event next week because we can't be going into people's houses installing these, and I'll find out what I find out when we open them up.
Okay, let us know, because I think that's a great feature, and it saves people a lot of messing around to keep your fridge going during an outage.
100%. So fireplaces, yes, they can produce heat, but they are designed for gorgeousness. Here's a fun story. So there's not many swimming pools up here in Arcata. It's very cold outside. Like it's in the 60s on hot days in the summer. So this is my friend CJ Ralph. He's a leading local birder. His wife heads a Native Plant Association. They own hundreds of acres out in this reserve that's just outside of town on the ocean. So they invite me through the gated access, and I come down this long driveway. And when I first started coming there to teach my kids how to swim in this greenhouse covered swimming pool that's got a rope swing, bananas growing everywhere, pineapples all over the place, just epic. Going there, smells like the tropics. And they used to have a gas water heater for the pool, and then it's fed with solar thermal, which means that in the summertime, it was too much. In the shoulder season, spring and fall, it was just right. And in the wintertime, solar thermal doesn't really work. You have to put huge amounts of panels, so much so that it's A, crazy expensive, and B, it produces too much heat and pressure in the summertime and breaks the system just through steam. It's you can't balance solar thermal for winter in a way that actually meets the heating needs. Well, at least without decommissioning large amounts of it during the summertime. So I encouraged him to get an air source heat pump pool heater. He did, and removed essentially $30,000 worth of solar thermal and installed a $10,000 all-in heat pump for the pool, which means it is a warm pool in the wintertime, and he runs it off the solar electric panels that are on his house. And we're still, using the rope swing and eating tomatoes in February and all the rest of it, eating sugar cane and turmeric and the pineapples. What a place. Okay, so now a little bit of electrical stuff. You want to add electric devices, but you don't want to upsize the electric wire to your house called the service. Maybe you don't want to even run any new wiring in your house. You have a dryer outlet, you have a stove outlet, you have an electric resistance water heater, you have some sort of existing outlet that's 240 volts, and you can put a plug splitter. You can plug in one of these boxes into that existing 240 volt outlet and now run two appliances on it. Maybe an EV charger and your electric resistance dryer, or your water heater and your stove, or it depends upon the existing plug that you have there, if it's a 30 amp, 40 amp, or 50 amp outlet. But basically you can match it up with something else that uses a bunch of power, and they essentially work as a transfer switch. You're either running one or the other, or this one on the far left, the NeoCharge, that's smart enough to let you do both. The Thermolec and the, second from the right, that one also lets you run multiple things at the same time. So it depends upon the product how fancy they are with their controls. But this is, yeah, Mark, you said when electrifying, we put a simple switch between our EV and our induction cooktop. Exactly. Hey, Mark, will you do me a solid and send me an email, please, so I can get a picture of that? Everyone wants to see case studies, and I would love if you would share with me a picture so I can have this permanently and also like put it in reports and things. If you're willing to share me an image of that, it would be very helpful for the movement. Bruce, you asked, do the splitters usually require a permit? No, they do not usually require a permit. They are UL listed. I mean, it depends upon, like the Thermolec, you can see that is permanently installed, and so that would technically require a permit. But on the far left-hand side, the NeoCharge, that is a glorified plug strip. And plug strips do not need building permits. It's just a plug strip for 240 volt as opposed to 120 volt. Greg Fotenhauer, you asked, what do you do about the combined pool hot tubs that we installed all over California? These were typically paired with huge gas burners. Let me show you what to do about that, Greg. Here, Space Pack, Arctic, Chiltrex, these things are all designed for something they can do both swimming pools and they can do hot tubs. And there are other ones that are designed for that as well. AquaCal, here. AquaCal is the world's largest pool and hot tub heat pump manufacturer. They're in Florida, and they know how to do hot tubs and swimming pools in Florida. So they do them up to Olympic-sized pools. They do combination systems. They do hot temperatures. If you're trying to get a big hot tub for 20 people, they have it all. You just have to work with the folks. Thank you, Mark. I'd really appreciate that. So that would be like, AquaCal are the people you should really be doing it with. But if you're, say, up in Lake Tahoe or Reno, I know you love to go to Lake Tahoe, Greg, Arctic. This is the best cold climate air to water heat pump, and they make them specifically for hot tubs. I've seen them advertised for hot tubs. So But I also know that they're like Arctic is a great product for an apartment complex's worth of hot water. So, kind of depends on what you're doing. Pete, I see your hand raised. What's up?
Yeah, Sean, just looking at the clock,
Oh,
we're
pardon me.
having fantastic Q&A, but we do have our four presenters who have
Yes.
put together their case studies for you.
I'm
And
2 slides away from their case studies. Let me just
awesome.
get to the point here. This is the bigger version of the plug splitters. Span panels are used all over the United States. Genius is up in Canada. You can plug 300 or 400 amps worth of stuff into a 100 amp service and panel, like this span panel here. And they balance stuff. If you want to avoid a service upgrade, but put in a huge solar array, you can put in a solar collar like the connector. So you can put up to 15 kW of solar onto 100 amp service if you connect it at the meter, as opposed to connecting it through your panel, where you're limited on your panel to about 4 kilowatts, but you're limited to your service to 15 kilowatts. So it depends on where you're plugging in the solar. All right, case study number 1. It's cold. Warren, Vermont, Tom Wilson. So you have a 1978 ski chalet, 1,350 square feet, slightly smaller than the average house in California, which is 1,400 to 1,500 square feet. The original house is super leaky. And then you had high moisture levels. I love it. A river ran through it. So you put in foam to make it airtight. Great. I love cork foam, by the way. Cork foam is it's like rice cakes made out of cork, but it is non-toxic if it lights on fire. That's the one downside behind like hydrocarbon foam. Okay, you got rid of the water. You got the slab insulation in there. Very good. Very important thing to do. Now you still have, like so many people do, the old-fashioned oil-fired hot air furnace. But then you've done a little bit of updating with sidearm water heater, electric wall panel radiators. Okay, so these are electric resistance.
No, actually, what we installed was Runtal hydronic radiators as opposed to baseboard to improve the mean radiant temperature, not switching to electricity. So it's still the propane boiler that fires those, but we rarely use that for space heating because we added heat pumps.
Got it. So I'm curious, do you know what temperature then you set your water heater at? So because you have these more efficient radiators?
I don't. I believe it's around. I think it's still 180. I don't know, but we rarely use the boiler for space heating. The heat pumps more than suffice for it. Probably in some ways, the only time we would use the boiler if we had a battery backup would be to run the boiler as opposed to the heat pumps. But
okay, so it's kind of an emergency when you don't have electricity.
It's there, but the key question to this case study is that is our source of hot water at this point. So we're looking for options.
Well, if looking for options, then would you consider? Where is your water heater tank now? I'm seeing it here. This is in the basement.
It's both in the basement. Both the boiler and the hot water heater are in the basement. The basement sidewalls have been insulated on both inside and out. The basement is not heated. I've got a shop down there, but there's no, since we're only run the boiler for hot water, there's actually very little waste heat in the basement as well.
So let's examine this. It's a cold winter day, like it's Christmas Eve, and you're doing some woodworking or something down the basement, but you have not turned on the gas boiler, the propane boiler. You don't need it. The heat pumps are doing just fine. What is the temperature down there?
Oh, maybe 50.
Okay, so, and what is the air volume? What is the square footage of the room in which the water heater is? I'm asking because I want to figure out about what.
Yeah, let's see, in the whole, I mean, if you include the crawl space, which is also tied in, boy, I'd have to do the math. It's about So it was about 18, no, it was about
Well, your
20.
house is 1350, right? So is it maybe 1,000 square feet down
Well,
there?
no, because we added a 400 square foot addition on it. So it's so the so in fact the volume of the house is around 1,800 square feet at this point.
Well,
Or not the volume of the house, the footprint.
what's going to happen is that if I'm recommending that you consider um, putting in just a standard 2,000 like $1,600 $2,400 heat pump water heater, the tank type with a little heat pump on the top of it. What that will do is dry your basement out some. It will lower the temperature in the basement. Depending upon how much you use it, it'll run 1 to 4 hours a day.
Well,
And
I understand those recommendations. If you go to a couple slides, you'll come to what my conundrum is. And that
what type?
is as part of the adding the addition onto it, which is on an insulated crawl space, code require us to also insulate under the slab for the addition. For the main part of the house, the house was originally built on ledge, which is essentially just rock and gravel on a steep slope. And we determined we had high radon levels. So I was forced to put in gravel, a drain tile, Inca drain mat, Stego polyethylene vapor barrier, and then poured concrete on that and a radon reduction fan.
Now, a radon reduction fan is just what I was trying to get. It sounds
Right.
like the question I have is that air being pulled out of your basement where you're hanging out, or is that air being pulled out from underneath the building?
No, it's pulled out from underneath the foundation.
Right.
So my key issue and what I'm asking Sean
Yeah.
is that given both the insulation under the slab in the crawl space, all of this is otherwise very well insulated, and the fact that the radon system is running a sub-slab depressurization, this house has essentially been decoupled from the deep earth.
Got it.
So any heat that the heat pump would draw off to heat hot water would come from heat generated within the thermal envelope.
Well, okay, that's kind of true. So the way that you can think of it then is I am still recommending that you put just a standard air source heat pump there. All it is the fan moving air, so it's not going to change the air pressure down there. Won't pull radon in or push radon out. It's just as if you had a fan sitting on a shelf or something. Now, what it's going to do is lower the temperature a degree, maybe 5 degrees. It's going to be somewhere in that range depending upon the air volume. Now, in the wintertime, it sounds like you're still getting enough heat from the ground. If it's 50 degrees down there, I realize that you have gravel that you're sitting on. You have air contact. There's heat that's moving.
Well, that air's been pulled out, so
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think there's much convection in there to the
well,
slab.
the upshot of it is that you have two choices. One is you could put an air source heat pump outside, and that would look like, I would recommend the smallest one you could pretty much get would be made by Chiltrex here. That is an 18,000 BTU per hour fan and heat pump. You only need about 4,000, maybe as little as 1,500 if you had a good storage system, but it's oversized is my point. This is the size that you'd have if you had it outside. It's not what I'm recommending. Instead, I would suggest that you stick one of these down there. And I don't think that you're going to have any complaints because other people have been doing this field research in their basements in Michigan and in Louisiana and in Pennsylvania. I've been hearing about it all over the country, people putting them in the basements, and it's just thumbs up that I hear from everybody that it is not much noise and some dehumidification and has a very small impact on the temperature downstairs when it's running. So
Well, I
That's
mean, I understand that people are happy with it. Even Alex Wilson from Sustainable Housing has one in his house. But the question is just given basic law, second law of thermodynamics, where does the heat come from?
yeah.
It has to
Okay.
come from heat generated within the house.
Uh, well, in the summertime, the heat is
Oh,
coming.
no, in the wintertime. In the summer, I
Yeah.
have no
Right. Okay.
problem.
So, and this is an important thing is that, okay, when the Department of Energy up in Seattle, PP&L, when they did this study with homes and they carefully studied where does the heat come from, summertime it's free. Looks like spring and fall, it's also more or less free energy. And in the wintertime, the energy is, if it's thermally isolated, which nothing really is, but thermally isolated, then the heat is coming from the air source heat pump that is helping heat the house. And in that case, the efficiency, the net coefficient of performance is being lowered. But as a whole year process, it is the most energy efficient thing to do is to stick a heat pump water heater inside the envelope because of the 3 seasons in which the energy is essentially free. It would have been either cooling you would have done anyway, or the energy movement that's coming in makes it so that it is still a very low energy system for heating your water. Putting it outside, not so much so. So it's a good idea. It seems both field studies and the nerds at the national labs like stick it inside your envelope, and that's the recommendation I have.
Okay.
All right, let's see what we got the next case study. Thank you very much, Tom. And also I'd say get that 120 volt types. I would recommend the A.O. Smith is kind of the highest quality one. They do 120 volts, and the A.O. Smiths, they have the 900 watts of electric resistance backup, which is a just in case kind of thing. But I always like having a little bit of just in case. Stuart Cummings, you say, oh, I think I should go to the next case study, but I'll get to you. Okay. Number 2. So this is in Georgia, high humidity environment, James Perch. 1,000 square foot new triplex per unit, so 3,000 square feet. And you want to ask about water heating and space heating. Cool. So this is a new construction that you're designing right now.
That's right.
Okay. So you got your manual J, S, D. Excellent. Thank you for doing all those things. Now you want a separate water heater for each of the units. How many bedrooms per unit?
2 bedrooms in each unit.
Okay. So 2 bedrooms. I'm keeping my camera off because I have not so great internet. I apologize, but I'm still here. So they probably need no more than a 50-gallon tank. The 2-bedroom unit usually would not have more than 4 people in it, like 2 people per bedroom. And a 50-gallon tank is arguably oversized, but it's certainly right-sized for 4 people. Unless you are putting in one of those gigantic sitting tubs or those eggshell bathtubs. If that's what you're doing, no? Okay. Because those require like an 80-gallon tank. But
okay,
people put 15 to 20 gallons of hot water into a standard bathtub, like, not the sitting tubs, but it's like 55% hot water. And so people generally get into 30 to 40 gallons of total water in those 50-gallon total size bathtubs, and with displacement and all the rest of it. So 50-gallon tank is great. How do you feel about that?
that should be fine for each. We're not expecting to be a big crowd or a large family in any of these, and so that would be probably adequate.
And when I'm looking here at your drawing, where are you planning on putting the tank? You already heard my advocacy for putting it inside the envelope. Is that the water heater next to
that's the water heater. That's correct.
So there's a concern here I want to voice, which is that if this washer dryer is a vented dryer, like if you're doing a stack type electric resistance exhaust based dryer, is that true or not true?
No, we had planned on actually the same model that you showed earlier in your presentation.
Oh, good. Because if you have lint blowing around with an electric resistance standard dryer, lint, of course, escapes through the door and starts clogging up the air intake on the heat pump water heater. Those two are not friendly with each other. But if you're
Mhm.
using a condensing or heat pump washer dryer, that's perfect. That's great. Because even
Good, good to hear.
that washer dryer has a lot of extra heat it'll be producing, and your water heater will love that. Yeah,
Okay.
super efficient. Okay, and what's your HVAC question? What are you thinking you want to do? Oh, you got your perfect wall. Very nice.
Yeah, so we're confident that we've got an airtight, that we'll be able to create an airtight building. And with that, roughly 1,000 square feet per unit, which is 8,000 cubic feet per unit. We haven't finished our manual J or B or S yet, so just wanted to see what your thoughts were to put some guidance and to help us see what direction we should be expecting to go.
So you do need to do dehumidification here, right? You agree on that?
We do. Yes, we do.
Okay. And there are, I believe, dehumidification is done with energy recovery ventilators. Can anyone weigh in on this? I get HRVs and ERVs confused on which one's good at dehumidification. Well, the
That's a
upshot
good
is
question. I'm not sure either.
they're not
Yeah.
sufficient.
So it would be the one called heat recovery ventilation, which would not let the humidity cross over. So and when they call it an energy recovery ventilation, they're using something, akin to paper as the barrier between the two air streams. And that way the paper can let moisture and heat transfer across. But since you're trying to dehumidify, you need to talk to the folks in your area who are doing those types of heat or energy recovery systems and follow the advice they can give you.
So I'm working on that Washington, D.C. project, high humidity, swampy Washington, D.C. And we are putting in, I'm going to go back to that image I have of the dehumidification that is in line. Now, Carrier has built-in dehumidification that is superior in the market. I just want to put that out there, that if you invest in a Carrier heat pump air conditioner, you have very little dehumidification that's extra. But most systems are not as good as Carrier at naturally dehumidifying. In that case, I would recommend you put in an inline dehumidification system. Or everyone gets a couple dehumidifiers and that you just get from the hardware store. And you just keep that rolling. Knowing, understanding, like you have to then take the thing out, go dump it in the sink, bring it back,
Yeah. Yeah, we're looking for something that's more built into the system and does not rely on the tenant to be actively taking care of it, but something that the building maintenance is going to be responsible for in these rentals.
Okay, this would be a good example.
And we had looked at a Santa Fe dehumidifier. That's what was recommended on their most recent project that we had designed that was really similar in the volume. It was a Santa Fe Ultra MD 33 recirculating dehumidifier. You familiar with that one?
I went over to Nate the House Whisperer over in Ohio, another moist place. And Nate, he teaches on dehumidification. And so I asked him what his recommendation was, and this was the one that he recommended. I am from a dry climate over here in California, and so I don't have the expertise. I would say you should consider this product because that's the one he's recommending as an expert. And of course, whoever is an expert in your community who's willing to maintain things and supports the products that they're selling is a really good person to listen to. Because local support is so key to everything. Okay, so that is a ducted system that we just talked about. You could go ductless, and there's dehumidification modes in ductless systems. You're familiar with that, like the ones that are on the walls?
Yes.
Yes. So this example here, this would be another perfectly good option where you'd put one of these in each of the rooms, and the remote control has the dehumidification function, just that. And it just squeezes all the water out of the room. That's great. I think these are the most energy efficient way to go usually, because they allow you to just heat and cool the room that you're in, and everyone gets to choose a different temperature. You know, each bedroom's kind of luxury that way. So in this case, you'd put like a heat pump outside that had, with your 2 bedrooms, you'd have a total of 3 fan coils, 1 for the central room and 1 for each of the bedrooms.
Okay.
That option works. Very popular. Last thing to consider, well, actually, because you're trying to do this real tight envelope, do this. This has the tiniest little refrigerant line coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I would show you that one that has the 2 big ducts on the wall that sits on the wall, but that's not
Mhm.
great for your like super tight envelope because that's a bigger hole.
Right.
And so these
Yeah.
little holes are what you're looking for. You stick the
Mhm.
fan coil on the patio or up on the roof, and you want a multi-head mini split. You don't want a VRF. A VRF is like a 5-ton version of a mini split, and a mini split for your apartments probably don't need more than 1.5 tons per apartment. 15,000, like 18,000 BTUs. That's probably
Mhm.
all you need. And if you put 2 tons, 24,000 BTUs, that'd be fine. That's almost oversizing it, but you'd be guaranteed solid or whatever after you do your own analysis there.
Okay.
Because that small system, that's the more efficient, less expensive, safer to install. If you do a VRF, as if you want to do 1 heat pump for the whole building, it involves alarms, it has a manifold, way more risk of refrigerant leaks, way more expensive. So just don't get tricked into doing a VRF. Instead, do 3
Okay.
discrete ductless mini split systems. It would be probably the best idea for you.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Is there anything else you want to chat about? You got your water heater idea? Your 50-gallon AOC?
Yeah, that was the stuff that I wanted to that was the questions that I had for you. So thank you for answering those.
Yeah, and Tom weighed in on you want a heat recovery ventilator for because you're gonna have a tight envelope and you need to have fresh air.
Mhm.
And something you need to know this. Heat recovery ventilators do not provide enough ventilation for the stove. You must put in an exhaust only stove vent. You need to do this for everyone's sake. Even if you're putting in an all electric, the
Yeah.
oil that you burn on the stove produces large spikes in indoor air pollution. And a lot of people who get
Yep.
really into worshiping their envelope don't want to put in an exhaust vent. Do it.
No, I'm with you. No,
All right.
you're preaching to the choir on that one. I agree with you.
Oh, thank gosh. Thank you. You know, I love all the passive house folks out there, but for a long time, people were just putting in heat recovery ventilators to ventilate the kitchen and poisoning people. That's not how you do it.
Right.
Okay. Number 3, Jane. Near Tucson, Arizona, it's a dry heat kind of place with your 1,500 square foot house and your 400 square foot garage. Lovely. It's a high performance community, all electric, double pane windows, killer. You got a 200 amp main, which means you have plenty of energy. You can do at least an 8 kilowatt solar array on the roof if you want with 200 amps without doing anything tricky. And you can plug everything in. You would be hard pressed. The Department of Energy couldn't figure out how to use about more than 50 amps at peak, turning everything on in an all electric house. So your 200 amps is tons. 50 amp range, 30 amp water heater, 30 amp dryer, 30 amp heat pump, 60 amp air conditioner. That is silliness. You should be putting in, I think, a different heat pump and abandoning that 60 amp air conditioner circuit and just getting like a hot climate heat pump with a nice computer in it. Your space heating here, so what you have is a 4-ton, 2-stage variable speed. And thank you. My son just delivered me ice cream matcha. Nice. Okay, so this product is kind of variable, but 2-stage really is just like a 2-stage bicycle. Variable is when you put a computer in it and it can have 100 different speeds or 100 different stages. 2-stage is old school, disposable. It is no longer serving you. If you got rid of it today, you'd be doing it a favor. But if you have it and it's brand new, that's too bad because you got sold a bill of goods. And here's your electric resistance water heater, 40 gallons. So if you were to make this a heat pump water heater that was electric resistance backup, it would have the same 30 amp demand usually, which is why I'm recommending you get the 120 volt types, and you could free up this power for something else. Or not, because truly your 200 amp panel should be enough. But this thing, the air handler and the heat pump outside, it's just not a very efficient system. That's what it comes down to. And you also don't need 4 tons. You need a 3-ton system that's efficient. Think of yourself as like going on the Tour de France. If you were going on the Tour de France and you wanted to keep up with Lance Armstrong but not take steroids, then you would want to have a 100-speed bicycle to get you up and down the Pyrenees. This is a 2-stage bicycle. It doesn't go up and down mountains. When it's hot outside, it can only go to its 2nd gear. And that's all it does. 1 gear or 2 gears. And you get a computer in it and you can get it up to, it's 130 degrees Fahrenheit outside and it's still doing just fine. This is a 2-speed bicycle. So you'd like recommendations on the electric range, the dryer, and was this heat pump a good choice for this house? Tragically, it wasn't very efficient and it was still all the expense without getting the efficiency. I mean, like 95% of the cost of this system was all the labor and the materials and the mobilization, but you got a 2-stage, which is next time, not that one. Now, the electric range, your stove. Right now, the best brand out there is LG, Samsung close behind it. In the standard stuff that you might be getting under $3,000, $1,000 to $3,000, I'd recommend LG and Samsung. And then if you have fancy aspirations, well, of course you can spend $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 on any stove out there, gas or electric, and get a Bosch or get a whatever. There's fancy stoves. But LG is excellent. The dryer, you can leave it there. If you're trying to use less energy, a heat pump dryer, and there are 240 volt heat pump dryers, they'll plug into the same dryer outlet you have there now. And there's also heat pump dryers that are 120 volt that you could plug into a different outlet, just a standard outlet. And the dryer is going to last a long time. It might be like a 10 years lifespan dryer, 15, 20. If you use a heat pump dryer, it uses roughly 1/3 as much electricity as your electric resistance dryer. Dryers are, unless you do a lot of laundry, are not the biggest energy use in the household. They're like 5% to 15% of the energy in the household. Depends if it's a larger household, it could be 20 or 30%. And I once was called in to help out a woman who had OCD and was laundering everything in the house all day long, every day. And she was putting herself into an energy bill crisis. But generally, dryers are not a big deal. You want to say something?
I just wanted to say that I had a bad feeling about that heat pump, and we moved into this house about 5 years ago, coming from being off the grid for over 30 years. And it was during COVID and the supply chain was pretty broken down, and it was the middle of summer in Arizona, and this is what we got. And I'm looking forward to getting rid of it, quite frankly.
Yeah. Tell me, what don't you like about it?
Well, exactly what you described. Is it's extremely noisy. It's kind of overblown for the space. I think that's the best descriptive word I could use it, but it's the 300 instead of the 200, and you can feel that. It's like being blasted into planet X, Y, and Z. So all good remarks. I appreciate all your commentary here, Sean.
your house needs no more than 3 tons. And it might need less if you did a study of it. But a 3-ton heat pump uses the existing ductwork in a house that has a gas furnace now. It's important. One of the bill of goods you got sold probably was brand new ductwork. They said, "Oh, we're going to put in a 4-ton." Nope, it's kept the ductwork as is.
No
Go ahead.
doubt. It was just had to get something, and that was the only thing kind of that popped up. I wanted to say that on average, we use here about 612 kilowatts of electrical use per month with the all electrical house. That's just FYI. But I would like to reduce that even more. Just
Well, that amount of electricity
Yeah.
is excellent. Like, that's a great energy consumption for your all electric home. And that would be about 4 kilowatts of solar up on the roof if you wanted to offset that with production,
yeah.
just so you know. But if you wanted to go more efficient, next time you're in the market for a heat pump, you get
Yeah.
like the heat pump I showed you, that Mitsubishi High 2
Yeah.
one that is appropriate
Yeah.
for extreme temperatures.
That looks good. That's something that I'm gonna, with my husband, will look into for perhaps our bioshelter, because with temperature shifts now that have become so different from when we first made the bioshelter, we're looking at needing to understand more about how to better heat and cool it. So thank you for that.
Welcome. I'll say Carrier is doing a very good job also. Mitsubishi and Carrier are both excellent
Okay.
at looking at brands to work with.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, do you have any other questions, Catherine, before we move on to the last?
No, I don't. Just thanks so much. I appreciate everything you said.
Absolutely. Well, case study.
I have a
4.
question while we're still on this
Yes.
case study. In Arizona, does nobody use swamp coolers anymore? Is everyone on AC? And what are the energy, financial comfort, and health liabilities or benefits of each?
Lots of people still use swamp coolers, and they work efficiently and wonderfully as long as it's not monsoon season. And when we have monsoon season, we have a lot of humidity. And then the swamp coolers, as Sean was talking earlier, when he was saying, use a humidifier when you have that very humid air down south, the same thing happens for us in Arizona. The air becomes so humid that you need to have an air conditioner, or you're just kind of sweltering with the swamp cooler.
I would say that these, I've seen swamp coolers being replaced with heat pumps, and people are able to drive the temperatures down further, particularly during moisture, as well as being able to do dehumidification with the heat pumps, because usually that's a mode on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's going forward. Going backwards, swamp coolers had applicability, but they're not all year long. So I really feel like the air source heat pumps are the multi-use Swiss Army knife of making the air better in a house. Last house, Boulder, Colorado. Stuart Cummings, 2,100 square feet, low humidity, but very cold in the wintertime. So you have a 200 amp main service, which should be enough no matter what we do. You got a 50 amp range, which is standard, 30 amp dryer, 40 amp electric vehicle charging service. I don't remember what that stands for. I have an EV, but I just call it my charger. So your water heater is 15 amps. We'll see what that looks like. A compressor, mini split heat pump. Cool. All right. I love this, by the way, this illustration of your inverter, by the way. That's the word for computer. When you see something that says it has an inverter, or it says variable drive, that means there's a computer inside. Unless it says 2-stage variable, and then that's not a computer. But see here, this is looking good on the left-hand side, and here's your water heater with the EcoNet, that ream tank storing at 122. So nice little system you got here. And I like that you installed your system on the old ductwork. Installing new ductwork is like 6,000 to 12,000 bucks. So $6,000 is what it should be. On average, new ductwork is $6,000. And old ductwork can lose 50% of its heat, but new ductwork is a dangerous thing to install in hot attics that are full of rodent feces, which is very common. So I'm like, very ambivalent about ductwork, what to do. So you have a 9.2 kW rooftop array, which is right at the edge of what you can do with a 200 amp service, as you probably know. You've got your batteries. That's nice. You're telling us about $3 a watt for installed price. Great.
Yeah, that was from me. You can ignore that.
Well, you got a nice system here, and you monitor it. Now the question, is there a question on this house, by the way? You're just showing off because it's a nice house. You got a nice solar array, nice battery.
Yeah, Sean, this is the one where we talked about, you've already mentioned the HRV and reusing the original ductwork. You like that snow shield over the outdoor unit on the heat pump there?
Yep, it's a good looking thing. Heat pumps, as I mentioned, work to -30 Fahrenheit. Just standard ones can go that low. But you have to keep the snow off them because it's the fan that's moving air and getting the work done. So if you cover the fan, obviously your heat pump doesn't work. So it's a standard thing in snow country. Usually you would even mount it off the ground a couple of feet and have a snow shield over it as like ideal perfect installation, but it's very nice. And I just want, for folks who are looking at it, what I'm seeing on the back of this inverter heat pump is 5 sets of pipes. And a set means like a pipe goes out and comes back in. So this would be an example, probably of a ductless mini split, a multi-head ductless mini split with 5 fan coils on the walls in different parts of this house. Now, Stuart, does that sound right?
Yes, that's correct. We don't, at any given time, in the summer, we cool the house with one the vast majority of the time. In the wintertime, we'll be running maximum of 3 of those heads. House is experimental too. We're often moving things around, experimenting with things.
Nice. So you're doing a great job. Is there any question you wanted to get to solve, or you wanted to show off that like this is the right way to do it?
No, there's there's a million different ways of skinning this cat. The thing I'd like to emphasize is the repurposing of the old ductwork. That's 1966 ductwork. It's leaky. It's terrible. It would have been terrible to reuse it for a forced air system, but the HRV doesn't care. That HRV is running at low volume, low pressure. So that HRV air just meanders its way down to the ducts that are, we sealed off most of the outlets, obviously. And so the fresh air is introduced into the bathrooms and bedrooms. And then it flushes all the way down to the end of the hall where another register is now the intake. It picks up the exhaust. And so it's a great use of crummy old ductwork.
That's brilliant. So you replace the ductwork essentially with a ductless system, fan coils on the walls.
Yep.
But you're still using the system for fresh air. Nice.
Exactly. Yeah, we like to emphasize that at Go Electric too. There's great uses for old ductwork. I mean, wiring runs, you want to run some 20 amp in your old house. You want to get some 20 amp down to the end of the house. There's all sorts of cool things you can use old ductwork for.
Brilliant. I'm constantly I work in apartments and it's difficult to run new wires. So surface mounted armored conduit is kind of the best practice to safely do it in apartments. You can't get into the walls. But ductwork, I'd never heard someone say, use that ductwork.
Yeah, think about it. You can run just regular Romex, right?
Right.
And then snake, you could snake a little wire into one end, snake it down the other end with a helper, and you can run it the length of the house, the apartment. Kind of lots of cool things you can do with that old ductwork.
Oh, nice.
I use old unused chimney flues for both my kitchen hood exhaust fan unit, go right up to the chimney, as well as for my radon reduction system.
Smart. Don't throw this stuff away.
That's fantastic. I love those. Those are right up there with the Watt diet. Sean, one other thing that Stuart emphasized is the he's got that Emporia data power monitoring system, and I wanted to see if you have any comments on your thoughts on some of the handful of different energy and power monitoring systems that are out there for home use.
Emporia is the market leader, and I don't have a comment on other systems because we actually like use Emporia in our field research, for instance. So I find them to be affordable, accurate, have a great interface, that you can actually monitor things. But I'm speaking from limited experience. I'm not the expert on monitoring on my team anymore, but the folks that are, we go with Emporia for like grant funded research for governments and such. So Sean Scaling, you asked a question here. You said, hey, can you tell us anything about hybrid electric heat pumps that have built-in natural gas heat boost at very cold temperatures? Boo! Stupid. Frustratingly ignorant. Not you. I last week, 2 weeks ago, I took out a freaking flamethrower and just burnt everybody I could on this like 200-person email. All the government agencies are involved, and it's a gas company, SoCal, like the gas company of Southern United States, who's trying to perpetuate gas infrastructure by adding cost to what is already a perfectly good heat pump that can work to -30 Fahrenheit. There's no place in the continental United States, not a spot, that needs to have a gas boost. You just get a computer, and it's an affordable way to do it. You'd be putting in the same heat pump in the same way, regardless, and all you've done is been fooled by the fossil fuel company, the fossil fueling company. It's outrageous that they're still proposing it. Like, it made sense in 2017 when Massachusetts was pulling out rebates and they were encouraging these hybrid systems, and you can buy them. But if you go buy them, you'll see that, like Goodman, for instance, and I was doing this work last night. Goodman will sell you a cold climate, and they'll say it's a cold climate heat pump. It goes down to blankety negative temperatures. And they'll sell you the gas furnace that gets added to that system that already works and does all the jobs you need. But they'll add the gas thing on, and they'll charge you more money. And then, because you have to coordinate it, and anyone who's actually running these things finds that the gas systems are coming on when they shouldn't be, like a real issue. But oh my God, it is another example of well-funded fossil fuel companies going out there and trying to peddle their garbage to us. I hate them. I just hate them for how much effort they put into tricking other building scientists. Because like I said, they have all the national labs folks on this email list. They got everyone thinking that computers don't exist and it's just magical thinking because they want us to think whatever makes them money. But there's no science behind it. It is a terrible financial investment for the house. It is a dangerous thing to do to add gas anywhere. Combustion fumes, the gas dangers, people's homes blow up. It just makes my head hurt. So that's what I would tell you about them, is that it is a trick. And that Daikin, Carrier, Trane, list any American company, and right now 95% of all of the gas furnace companies that make in the United States have already signed a letter saying ban our products. They sent it to the Department of Energy this year. They sent it to the California Air Resources Board this year. None of them want to be selling gas furnaces anymore. And that if you even install them now, you have a guaranteed stranded asset. It's a waste. But that's what they're in the business of, is wasting our time and energy with their bad ideas. Oh my God. Sorry for getting me going, but I really did. That one gets me more upset than most, is having them compromise a perfectly decent heat pump by adding on a scabby little gas furnace to it.
What if there is already a gas furnace installed to use that same unit and air handler to power, to distribute the heat from the heat pump?
Yeah, I call it box switching.
Yeah.
Where you just take out the box and you put it in the identical box, but it's a heat pump box now instead of it just being either an air conditioner and furnace box or a gas furnace box. But usually you can get the exact same dimensions. and put in the heat pump into the same place from the same manufacturer. But it's just like a 10-year or 15-year newer product than whatever you're replacing. That's a good idea. It's just simple. You don't have to change your infrastructure. Just use the same closet, the same duct work, things like that. And yeah, a question from Bruce. You said, if you have a hybrid air source heat pump with a gas furnace, should you have the gas furnace removed? Yes. You should have it removed. As an example, there was a heat pump, and I'm going to take off my camera here for a second because it's freezing. I mean, my video is freezing. Okay, so my sister-in-law and brother owned a condo in New York City. They sold it and fled here during COVID. It's New York City. There's more trucks on the street that freaked them out. 2 months after they sold our condo, the building blew up. Someone on the 3rd floor had put in a heat pump, but had not decommissioned their gas furnace, had turned on their gas stove in the house and blew themselves up and destroyed the building. The water came on every building. The hallways are flooded. Anything that wasn't damaged by the explosion was then completely drowned in water. The whole building had its gas cut off for the next 6 months, and many of the people were made homeless. It's like, if you have a gas, anything that you don't need, have it decommissioned all the way back to the place that you possibly physically can, ideally outside of your building. Like, get the gas out, because people's homes blow up. It's one of the grimmest things I do on YouTube is search the most recent home explosion. Sometimes it's captured on a police or a fire department's dash cam, and you'll see other fire department staff being blown up in real time by some explosion where they showed up for a small thing and the building goes into little tiny pieces. And it's just horrifying. Anytime there's an opportunity for a gas leak in a building, get rid of it. Just don't have gas in your buildings. The worst case scenarios are just so awful. There's essentially a gas explosion every day in the United States. It is usually some gigantic piece of infrastructure and you can see the gas explosion from miles away, but it's often just someone's house, and it's always terrifying / tragic. So yeah, get rid of it. Let's see, any other questions here? I think we're out of questions, but if anyone wants to take themselves off, you're more than welcome to ask any other questions.
Yeah, I asked a question that wasn't replied to in the chat. I guess it was deep. It wasn't in the main feed. So I was talking about, I know some people have a gas oven that's kind of small. It's a double wall oven. They want to replace it. They found an electric one that fits, but there aren't any gas ones that fit, thank goodness. But the only real power nearby is on the other side of the wall in the garage. They have a dryer outlet. So what I'm wondering is, can you use a plug-in dryer buddy or a circuit splitter, and then a cord going to the built-in oven, and Tom, without a permit? And Tom said, well, you need a permit if the cord goes through the wall, and I assume attached, but say it's an appliance cord, like on the dryer, coming from the oven through a hole, it's not attached to the wall, and then it plugs in. Would that be permit free, or do you also have to make the oven itself like a cabinet that's not secured to the building, either on wheels or just sitting on a counter?
Yeah, if things are attached to the building, quote unquote, they are considered something that has a permanent wire. So, but this is a little bit on the edge, because also you can get 120 volt, plug them in anywhere, wall mounted stoves. So she sounds like she's found the right size one, but it's 240 volt, and you're going to run a wire through the wall, a plug, to like a circuit splitter. And electrically wiring, that's great. The safety wise, that's perfect. That's just like kind of on the edge of.
So if the oven was mounted in a box that was not screwed to the house, but was just sitting there where the old oven used to be,
right,
that would be clearly permit free, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you then take that cabinet and screw it with one screw to the building so it doesn't come off in an earthquake, then it requires a permit.
Well, I mean, that's getting right at the very edge. And keep in mind that somewhere between 90 and 96% of all construction inside of homes doesn't get building permits. And so like you're talking this very edge case. I mean, there's edge cases as well for like heat pump water heaters, because there can be such minimal plumbing involved or electrical wiring involved, that sometimes you can have a different contractor do it, or but a water heater is so big and generally strapped to the building and things like that you kind of can't get away with saying it doesn't need a building permit. Granted, almost nobody gets building permits at all,
Right.
anywhere for doing this stuff. It's mostly apartment complexes, but even then, being involved in this, there's lots of avoidance of building permits.
Well, I think to get rebates, often you need to show a building permit.
Yeah.
So all the heat pump water heaters I've put in have been permitted jobs with sunwork.org. Give them a little plug. Yep. The other question was, so this same woman has a house with hydronic heating on the floor, and there's a closet that has a gas boiler box down on the wall, and it's a 20 psi closed system. Of course, it refills automatically. And then there's a gas water heater, 40 or 50 gallon in the same cabinet. It's kind of tight. So I was wondering, is there a way to use, say, an 80 gallon heat pump water heater, which would fit there where the 40 or 50 gallon is, and then a heat exchanger in order to get heat into the hydronic system? Because they're different pressures, so you can't use the same tank clearly. But yeah. I'm looking at not having a split unit. I don't want anything outside. I want all in that cabinet, and we'd increase the ventilation on the doors.
Okay, so if you want to do that, you need to use like a Lochnavar or an A.O. Smith CHP 120. What you're looking for is almost a commercial scale product, and that's right size for BTUs, is what I'm saying. And
does it have a heat exchanger in it so that you can use the tank for domestic and then just have a coil through the bottom for the hydronic system?
I am not positive. What these systems are used for now in apartment complexes that I'm expert in is for recirculation, which is what you'd have to a fan coil system or to a warm floor, right? And you're looking for something that has a fair amount of BTU capacity. But the thing is that the heating of a house, how big is the house? 1,500 square feet, like an average house, something like that?
Yeah, they hardly ever use the in-floor heating, as it turns out. They're very thrifty older people. And when they're done with it, I'm sure the house will get torn down just because of the way things are in this neighborhood. So we don't need to build the system for people who run the heat all the time and take showers all the time. And they're just super thrifty. Yeah. Think Depression era.
So here's the thing, is that those individual tanks are not designed for recirculation. I've done that, failed. I've seen it very clearly that it was the worst possible thing to use an integrated 40 to 80 gallon tank as a hydronic heating system. They're just domestic water heaters. End of the conversation.
But do any come with a heat exchanger built into them?
They're only a 4,000 BTU space heating system. So you would have the hell of a time heating a 1,500 square foot house. That 4,000 BTUs is, think of it this way: a refrigerator freezer is a 3,000 BTU heat pump. Opening the doors of your refrigerator and freezer is approximately what that water heater can pull off. And you just wouldn't do that to try to chill a house. It's the 4,000 BTUs, that is smaller than the smallest window AC that you've ever seen. They start at about 5,000 BTUs and go up.
Well, it's only for heating, but yeah.
Yeah. It's just that it's too small. So that's why I'm recommending you up to the next size, which would be probably 100 to 120 gallon tank. And it'd have a larger compressor on it. That would meet the needs. So that I'm going to type it into the chat here.
Oh, good. I was trying to take notes.
CHP 120. And check that product out. Look at its specifications. And Lochnavar makes one like it, and other people do also.
Okay, great. Thanks for that.
You don't want to do a split system. And it does have enough electric resistance in it that it can also do some significant backup heating if needed. So it's all scaled for what you're for house heating and domestic hot water.
Right, we're on a 100 amp panel, so it's got a
Yeah.
it's
Well,
a consideration.
Always put in a sub panel, right? And that sub panel could be a lumen sub panel, or it could be like that dryer buddy. So your 100 amps should be enough. But if it isn't, send me an email. And Tom Cabot on this team here, he and I or some of my staff, we can try to work out a solution that keeps you on 100 amps. But the easiest thing for you to do, honestly, would be to install one of these for that house, going all the way back. One of these hydronic air to water heat pumps here, like the Chiltrex or the Space Pack. Those are designed for what you're talking about. Hydronic floor plus domestic hot water.
With an outside unit.
Yeah, but with an outside unit. And if you don't want the outside unit, then you do need to go to like that CHP 120 and try that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. There is Meredith Haynes. You asked, ahead of my gas water heater, heat pump water heater installation, I tried to engage electrician in considering an option that did not involve adding a sub panel with a new 240 volt circuit. For example, could my EV charger and my clothes dryer share one circuit and free up the heat pump water heater? Yeah, of course, you're right. And that electrician was wrong. And you couldn't get past the word no in Virginia. And, it's really unfortunate. But here, I want to show you this just for kicks and giggles. Give me a second here while I bring up Amazon. But basically, on Amazon, you can buy the circuit splitter that you needed. And you could have just held it in your hand and been like, get out of my way. Let's see here. Neo Charge Smart Circuit Splitter. And now I'm going to share that screen with you. Okay. Amazon website. So this 14-50, that's the biggest one. That's a 50 amp circuit, but they also make 14-40s and 14-30s. But the upshot of it is that, yeah, you can totally use one outlet and plug two things into it and then free up another outlet for another appliance. And this circuit splitter idea is, NeoCharge is kind of my favorite personally, but you can see there's a lot of other products that are out there, whatever this like Grizzly E dual two plug thing, that's sort of the same idea, but it's for two EVs specifically. The NeoCharge, it's nice because it's, it doesn't care. It's agnostic if it's a water heater or a stove or a dryer or whatever. And Meredith, I see you there. Do you want to chat with us?
Oh, just to say that I am starting the Rewiring America electric coach course, and so even if I didn't solve it for me, maybe I can.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this, the $280
helpful to other people. Yeah.
This cost $280, right? That was probably a lot less money than that sub panel
Well,
that Joker ran.
Yeah. But to be clear, my EV charger is a juice box sitting on the outside wall, hardwired. Maybe not the same scenario. I couldn't quite picture it.
You can hardwire. You can put a 240 volt plug on a hard wire, like that the hard wiring is optional. You can put a plug on it so that you can put it then into an outlet like this, as opposed to directly wiring it into your circuit breaker panel the way a hard wire is. So it's
just a long way away from each other.
Yeah.
Too.
And so long distances can be a little bit trickier, but the same idea is that if you had that long wire and at the end of it you had a plug attached to it, and then you could use that plug to go into a circuit splitter and share it.
They just argued that not in Virginia, you cannot share. It cannot be on a shared. I wasn't confident enough in saying, well, no, this is one at a time, not overloading a 240 volt circuit. But anyway.
Well, the simple switch, let's see if I can get simple switch circuit sharing, whatever. The simple switch not on Amazon. Well, it's one of my slides here. I can go back to it. The reason I'm just bringing it up is that in California, it depends upon which jurisdiction you're in. If you can use a NeoCharge, which has a computer in it and is a standard transfer switch, or if they will only let you do a transfer switch. So NeoCharge here on the left, the little computer says you can run 2 appliances at once as long as it doesn't go above the 30 amps or 40 amps or 50 amps, but 2 things can run at once. Simple switch is a transfer switch, period. One or the other.
Or the other.
Is
Got it.
100% solid, code compliant, going back to, there was a big fire in Berkeley, California in like 1919, and they had an all electric building code for about 5 years after that, 100 years ago, ironically. And you can still find transfer switches on these 30 amp households built back then, so that they could have all electric houses with 30 amp transfer switches moving stuff around. So it's like ancient technology that's always been code approved. And that's simple switch. Made in Ohio. Simple, strong, you know. So let's see, there's one more chat, though people have been dropping off because, you know, we're getting to the end here. Oh, good. Thank you, Tom, for sticking a simple switch in there. Yeah, Stuart Cummings says, can absolutely share a dryer and an EV charger. Get another electrician. Yeah. Are there any
Well,
other
the one thing I did right was replacing the water heater before the previous one failed. So I did have time to try and do it right, but ended up just.
Good job. This is a transition moment. We're all early adopters in this. You know, we're standardizing it though. Sam, I see your hand raised. Do you want to ask your question? You can take yourself off mute.
No, I just wanted to say something before I go. I appreciated your pop-off earlier about hybrid technology. I agree that we should not be compromising with fossil fuel companies. We either sit down and stagnate and the world dies, or we continue on and innovate and, you know, move forward into an age of flourishment. That's my 2 cents on that.
I agree. We have computers. This takes less than what it is a hand calculator to do all the work of figuring out what's the temperature outside, what's the temperature inside, what's the pressure of the refrigerant. It is the simplest math. And the idea that we would have to go back to Stone Age burning stuff when we have computers. Can we live now and stop burning stuff? Yeah, we can flourish using ingenuity. Well, it's 6. I'm just recovering from a cold, so if it's cool, let's call it good, and we'll reconvene maybe next month. And you guys are welcome to ask questions. Give me a week to respond, but I'm more than happy to try to just make recommendations and all the rest of it. And as mentioned, it's all pretty laid out in this booklet here. You're very welcome, Meredith, on how to do all electric retrofits. However, we are coming out with one that Palo Alto, the city's utility, has paid us to create. So it's focusing on hydronic homes. Eichler homes, quote unquote, are really common in Palo Alto. It's focusing on higher cost installations. There's no place more expensive than in the nation than the home of Facebook to get a home retrofit done. So they're asking us to be real about just the city of Palo Alto. But what you'll find is the guide's coming out shortly, and it's very updated in the product guides and things like that, and even shorter. But I still think this is my favorite. It's the one from April 2022. Not that old. Okay. Thanks, y'all. Hope you have a very nice evening.
Sean, thank you so much.
Absolutely, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody.